Welcome back to the show. Today we have Cameron Atlas. He's a keynote speaker, storyteller, executive coach, and musician. Cameron, welcome back to the show. As always, it's great to have you back.
Always a pleasure, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you back on the show. You always give such good insights and thoughts around, well, things I think I'm struggling with, others I know are struggling with. But maybe before we get into all that, maybe do you want to give us a quick background on yourself, kind of maybe where you grew up, where you went to school, how you got to where you are now, and then we'll dive into what we're going to cover today.
Yeah, high level, outback Australia, grow up on a farm, long way from anywhere that anybody's ever heard of. Closest big city was about a 9-hour drive away. So
Okay.
Long way. Had singing lessons over the phone because back then internet wasn't
That's
good
amazing.
enough to where it was today. So that was in grade 12. There was no singing teacher in town for about 500 miles. So yeah, learn the power of technology and how it can help us to connect with opportunities that we might not have otherwise had the opportunity to connect with. So I learned that at a very young age, and love now helping people to maximize their potential, both personally and professionally. And I've been doing that for about 13 years now, working with CEOs and owners of companies and family offices, helping them really to step up to the next level of excellence. And then absolutely love blending the passion that I have for music and the music that I've written on stage with education. And usually I'll have a grand piano on stage with me for the talks, and now a guitar as well. So it's pretty cool. To be able to have that as a career, that's for sure.
No, that's awesome. So I'm curious, because I think a lot of people, especially busy people and the people you work with, are struggling with kind of productivity, technology. AI is always in the news right now. What are your thoughts on what are you seeing in the industry right now? And how are you helping people cope and deal with some of these struggles?
Yep, it's a great question. There's a couple of things here. One is the technology side, and then two is the human side. So on the technology side, there's going to continue to be productivity hacks, different apps, different ways. AI is obviously a big one now as well. Different ways in which we can go about increasing our output. And that's all well and good. But on the other side of that is making sure that you as a human is determining what is most important. Why is that most important? And that comes first and foremost is to understanding, okay, what outcome are we aiming to achieve here? And I like to go out with clients out to a 5 to 50 year period, depending on what age they are, because then we can reverse engineer that, right? If you go right out to the end of your life, or even into 5, 10, 20 years time, you might not have all the objective answers as to where it is that you're going, but you have an idea about, say, the impact that you want to make or the legacy you want to leave. And you can start to work back from that. If you're building a company at the moment and you're solving a specific challenge, okay, what are the specific objective outcomes you want to achieve over, say, the next 3 to 5 years? And from there, we then go back into 12 months, back to 90 days, and then what has to be done over these next, week to month to ensure that you're getting done what you need to get done. And with that, most of the clients that I'll work with, it's not about, all right, what do you need to be doing? It's more about what do you not need to be doing? Like, what are you going to stop? What are you going to get off of your calendar? And because these are very busy people, very successful people, they're achieving extraordinary things, and they've got a lot on their plate. And the more that we can remove from them, and that comes in the really two forms. You stop doing it altogether, because no one should be doing it, right? So these are things that are wasting your time. Yeah, there are things that are unproductive. And then there is, okay, you're going to stop doing it, but you're going to delegate it. And you delegate that to either a person or to technology, which we started talking about before. And so that delegation piece is, it still needs to get done. It's still important in terms of the outcomes that you're aiming to achieve or what needs to be executed on. But somebody else can be doing that, or something else can be doing that. But I was just with a client yesterday, and we were mapping out in 12-month objectives and then mapping that down into the 90 days. And a couple of the questions that you can be asking yourself is, okay, if I simply achieve what I've set out here over these next 90 days, does that put me on track to achieving my 12-month objectives? And if I achieve my 12-month objectives, does that put me on track to achieve my 3 to 5 year vision? And if that all lines up, you can then focus fully, laser focused on those 90-day actions that you've got to execute on. Otherwise, if you're spending too much time, am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? I'm not too sure here. No, if you can just get rid of that because you've done the work at the end of each 90-day segment, for example, and said, right, I've planned it out. I just know I need to execute on this now. And you go about it, then you reassess. And we'll talk about how to assess that on a regular basis, maybe in a moment. But I'll pause there and see if there's any questions there.
Yeah, before we get into that, so I get obviously cutting things out or delegating things, but how do you work with your clients to actually make those decisions? Because I know you work with people that might have a large team, but some of the people listening to this will be, maybe it's just them, they have a small team, maybe they're trying to add somebody, but how do they figure out what they can delegate or not delegate? Because I think when you start a company, you're probably doing most things, if not all the things, and then trying to let go is hard, right?
Yeah, big time. So there's a couple of exercises that I'll do with clients. Number one is, can we find any low-hanging fruit? So we look through somebody's calendar, look through their week, and see, okay, is there something that's taking up maybe it's an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours of your time per week? And that's actually reasonably easy because you don't even enjoy it necessarily. Could we potentially delegate that? And the key there is delegating it effectively, because if you don't delegate it effectively, the delegation becomes an extra task, because then you're having to talk with them and then you have them micromanage that specific scenario, and you're still not getting it. So now you've just added another thing to your plate. That's not going to work. And then it'll be, I'll just do it myself then. And then you take it back and you think, I just can't. This delegation stuff doesn't work. No one can do it better than I can. They might not be able to do it exactly as you can, but 4 questions that I get clients to ask when they delegate to somebody is, after they've been through a week, for example, of executing on a specific task, what worked well? What didn't? What are you going to do about it? And what do you need help with? And if you think about it, if you have those 4 questions, so what worked well, you're celebrating a win. They're feeling good about the progress they're making. Tick. You need to have that because they need to feel like they're doing a good job. Otherwise, they're going to feel like they're losing momentum. They're not going to feel that motivated. And, just all these problems that things that I'm not doing well. So you start with that. The second, what didn't work out well? What mistakes were made? And what you're looking for, especially with these second and third question, what didn't work well? And then what are you going to do about it over this next week? What you're aiming to have is them develop the thinking required to adapt what they did the week before with what they're going to do the week after, right? And this can be a very quick check-in. It can be simply 2 minutes, or it can be up to a 30, 60-minute meeting, for example. But what you're looking for is when they answer that question, okay, this is what I'm going to do about it. And you can see, because you've been doing this for, let's say, the last 6 to 12 months, that is not going to get that outcome.
Yeah.
You don't just jump in and say, all right, that's not going to work there. So, okay, share with me how this is going to allow you to achieve this specific outcome over this next week. And they can start sharing it with you. And one of 2 things will happen. One, you'll realize, there's something I haven't thought of, and go forth and conquer. Or 2, they'll realize, this isn't actually going to work. Great. So let's have a conversation about that. So what these 4 questions allow you to do, it allows you to pinpoint where their gap is in their thinking, and allows you to fill that gap as quickly as possible, which then increases the likelihood of them being able to execute the following week, and allows you to stay further up, which allows you just to check in rather than having to micromanage. The moment you have to start micromanaging longer than a pretty short amount of time, you're right. You've either got the wrong team person, or your effectiveness in terms of delegation isn't where it needs to be as a leader. So that's a huge part of making sure that you're delegating effectively there.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think even just having questions to objectively kind of look up, outside, and then kind of analyze what you've been doing is key, right? Because sometimes you can get so trapped in your own head with well, it can't be my fault. It's but if you didn't really tell somebody, it's like, well, I want to buy a new car. It's like, well, there's a million cars to pick from. Do you have like a family? Is it just you? Is it like
Yeah.
you can't just give something so generic, right? So being able to answer and ask simple questions, I think help yourself reflect is actually really useful.
Yeah, it's that's the thing. Those 4 questions you can be asking of a teammate to performance manage. You can ask yourself that. You can utilize that with your spouse. You wouldn't use those questions exactly. It would be more like, "Hey, what are you really enjoying about our relationship right now? You know, is there anything that's really bugging you? Anything that's frustrating you? Oh, let's maybe have a conversation about how we could, work on that together. And then how could I best support you as a partner?" Those 4 questions, there's exactly the same structure. It's just in a softer way rather than it being, all right, I'm going to performance manage my spouse. That's not going to go down too well usually. So those can go across the board. And then your ability to be able to, one other exercise that I would recommend people doing is you block out these 4, get a piece of paper, 4 quadrants. What are the things that I'm really bad at and don't enjoy? What are the things that I'm okay at, but don't really light up when I go to do it? Then what are the things that I actually am pretty good at or great at, and I enjoy those? And then what are the things that there's nobody in the world that would be better off doing it than I would? And once you just write down the things that you do on a weekly basis, and write down all of those into those quadrants. And then what you're aiming to do is then delegate that bottom half, the stuff that you suck at, or the stuff that you don't really enjoy. And eventually you get your time to be spent there where your time is best spent because you're best at those things. And then other people are best at these other pieces. And it allows you to enjoy yourself more at the same time. So that's another exercise that people can go through to work out, okay, what types of things do I want to be starting to delegate first and foremost? That's a great exercise to go through.
No, that makes sense. I think the other thing too that I'm curious about is, because I think now that we're all virtual, or a lot of people are virtual, or part of the team's virtual, just getting productivity and like not getting sucked in by meetings all day long. Because when you're kind of leading or in your management role, you can just spend an entire day in meetings and get 0 done. And then obviously people still expect stuff done from you. So how do you manage, or what are your thoughts around that, or some productivity kind of tips or advice? Because I find sometimes I try to leverage software sometimes. What are your thoughts?
Yep. So, I mean, yes, from a software standpoint, if meetings need to get booked in, you could have a calendar management software from a booking standpoint. One thing that I hugely recommend, highly recommend, I did this with a client just yesterday, and I do it for myself as well, but specifically with a client yesterday, it was we spoke about, I'm really struggling to find time he's running the company, so the CEO of the company, right. Really struggling to find time when I'm also doing a lot of the sales to think about the business and the long-term strategic direction of the company. And he said, I'm really struggling to find the time.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, let's have a conversation about this. Number one, we need to shift your language. So instead of finding the time, you need to make the time. Because you're trying to find the time when everybody else is booking into your calendar, you're not going to find it. You're not going to find it. You need to make the time. So that's the switch there. I can't find the time to I'm going to make the time. The second was increasing the prioritization of that time. And so when it was, okay, well, sales is very, very important, right? What we shifted in terms of his perception is the time that I spend, if I can spend, let's say it's 2 90-minute segments, which is what we ended up doing, 2 90-minute segments each week to work on the strategic direction of the company. That time that I spend on that, and the ideas and us being able to then have clearer direction of the actions that are being taken is so incredibly valuable, because it allows then the actions that follow, it allows us to be more productive, it allows us to be more focused, it allows us to get more done. And so there was, 1, a shift in language, 2, a shift in value of why I would do it in the first place. Because if you know that you need to create the time in your calendar, but you're not doing it, there's usually something else going on underneath the surface. It's exactly the same with somebody who wants to eat healthier.
Yeah.
Well, you know you need to exercise more, or you know you need to eat less. They're the only two things at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And yet a lot of people are still unhealthy. And so we get to the core of it. There were those two pieces first up: shift the language, shift the value of it. So the prioritization now is, it is very important for me to actually make the time. Third is then actually get it into your calendar ahead of time. And so with this specific client just yesterday afternoon, we blocked out 2 90-minute segments into his calendar, recurring every single week. And, now there's a couple of things that he has to move around over the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then it's already in there. And then one of the things that I talk with the clients as well, in a personal sense versus a professional sense, in a personal sense, it's treating yourself like your very best friend, like an uncompromising best friend. In business talk, it's treating yourself as your very best client. And your very best client, if you have something locked into your calendar, you've made the time now for something specific that you've deemed to be important. You wouldn't reschedule that client session, a call with a client, unless it was an emergency. Right. So why would you do it to yourself? Because what you're then saying is that you're not actually as valuable. You're not valuable. Your time isn't as valuable as other people's. And so that's where you're not going to set healthy boundaries. Right. And the boundaries that then allow you to be productive, to be feeling in control of your calendar rather than feeling out of control. And so that's something that I highly recommend, is whether it's a 90-minute segment or out to a 3 or 4 hour segment or even a full day, is having block time where you've blocked out a certain segment in your calendar. And I know for me personally, eat on each day during the mornings, because, with the talks I deliver with live music on stage, there's a lot of training that I have to do in order for that to occur. So there's an hour of piano, hour of vocals, hour of guitar, right? So there's 3 hours of training there, plus an hour workout, and then like a strength workout, as well as an hour from a cardio standpoint. So it's about 5.5 hours, all right, from a training, just purely from a training point of view. If I don't get that done in the morning, I'm going to struggle to get it done, right? And so it's my commitment to be able to deliver an excellent experience on stage. I barely ever have calls or client sessions or any kind of meetings until the afternoon, because that allows me to take care of what I need to take care of, which then allows me in the afternoon to fully serve my clients, to be of service on, an interview or on a show or something description, have a meeting with somebody in my network, that type of thing. So blocking out certain areas in your calendar can be extremely useful as well, to make sure that you're, again, feeling in control of your calendar rather than the calendar controlling you.
No, that makes sense. So, but how do you stay diligent to that time? Because as busy, like even with yourself, right? Like you're preparing for these speaking engagements, for a number of hours every day. And then you actually have to go do that speaking engagement. Sometimes it's in the morning. It throws off, because you're traveling, throws off your whole kind of routine. How do you have the motivation to get back into that routine and not just like fill that time up with maybe some catch up time? Because we all know, like, you go on vacation and you're, crazy busy till you leave. You're crazy busy when you get back. You're probably checking email and maybe doing a little bit of work while you're on vacation. It's like, how do you kind of get back into that routine? Because I think that's something people struggle with too.
Yeah. I mean, I look at, I'll speak for myself here, and this definitely happens with clients as well, but for this one specifically speak with about myself. So a huge part of this is around purpose. Okay. Around why you're doing it in the first place. And I'm going to give an example here, because when I first started learning guitar, right? I played piano for 30 years. When I first started learning guitar, I thought if I could just do an hour a day, that would be an incredible outcome, right? Yeah. And then when I realized that, and it happened, these were these funny moments, right? The first one was I wrote a song that just was on the guitar, and I realized, I wouldn't have written that on the piano. And so all of a sudden it was, there's a whole new lot of songs that I'm going to be able to write in the future. That increases the need for me to learn the guitar. And then I went and got tested for COVID back in, I must have been 2021, late 2021.
Yeah.
And I was driving to one of those drive-throughs, and all the cars are lined up, and I drove past a car, and there's a dude in his driver's seat with an acoustic guitar.
That's amazing.
And I'm like, oh man, I could have brought mine. And I realized, I can take the guitar anywhere as well. I've been tied to a specific, you see the piano here? I'm tied to a specific geographical location when I want to play music. All of a sudden, this opened me up to play anywhere. That, in addition to, added versatility to the keynotes that I deliver as well, where, if we can't have a grand piano on stage because there's not either the budget for it or the space for it, or they just don't have one in that geographical location, depending on where it is, that's cool. I'll just bring the acoustic and have a line for me to plug into, and we're good to go. Yeah. And so from a versatility standpoint, all of a sudden, that was the most important skill for me to develop. And so over that 500-day period, I averaged 4 hours on the guitar every day for 500 days. Wow. And people maybe look at that and go, that's insane, or that's crazy. I go, well, it made a lot of sense to me because that was the most important skill. So then I removed everything else that I possibly could so that I could develop those skill sets. And that comes in going full circle. What am I going to stop doing? A lot of my social life stopped as a result of that, because they were 12 to 16-hour days by the time everything else was in there as well. It was every day for 12, for that 500-day period. It was insane. It was a crazy, crazy period. But because the purpose was so on point, and I love to theme my years as well. So last year was the year of laser focus. Right. And so that being the year of laser focus, for me to live in alignment with that theme for the year, for me to be on purpose, for me to be specifically aligning to what it is that I've deemed to be most important, then it's my responsibility to line up to that. And so this is about holding yourself accountable. It's about being your uncompromising best friend. It's in those moments where you don't necessarily feel motivated to do it, but it's I'm going to do what's required here. It's not what do I feel like doing in the moment. There were so many times I didn't feel like doing that many hours on the guitar. So many times. Yeah. And yet it was, I know the outcome. This is a must, and it's not a nice to have. This is a must for me. And that's what I would say is if somebody is struggling listening to this, struggling with the motivation to get back into something, I would really have a strong look at a solid look at yourself in terms of the purpose that you have, why you're doing it, and whether that's really big enough to overcome the specific challenges that you're experiencing. Because that has to be there when you're not going to be motivated all the time. That's just the reality of it. You would like to think, I want to be purposeful and feel inspired the whole entire time. Nope. There's going to be times where you do not feel like it, and you just got to do it anyway.
Yeah. And that's what I love about you is just, it's all about reframing the question in your own mind and or to your team on like what really matters, right? And focusing on that and figuring that out for yourself. And then in what you mentioned earlier about maybe delegating some of that, maybe getting rid of some of that stuff, and kind of a combo of all that stuff. And I think just refocusing and figuring that out for everybody can really be life-changing. And it has for you, clearly.
It's, again, there will be new technology, new tools, new ways of solving certain challenges that you're experiencing right now. Yeah. And if you have underneath all of that, the thinking that allows you to be more productive, the thinking that has you treat yourself with love and respect, to hold yourself accountable, to be responsible when nobody else is around, and to still follow through with what it is that you said you were going to do. And not because you want to show somebody anything, it's because of what your standards are. And if you can build in that level of care and love and respect for yourself, discipline will be there. But that has to grow. It has to grow. Otherwise, if you're doing it to prove yourself to other people, well, what happens when nobody else is around?
Yeah, it's interesting.
In the moment where it's 2 a.m. and you've got to get work done, or you got get up at 5 a.m. and get things done and nobody else is around. Do you still get it done?
Interesting.
That's the kicker. And if you're not doing it when nobody else is around, that's where the game is won, because that's where you're spending more time with yourself than anybody else is.
Yeah, interesting. No, that makes sense. So I'm curious, you mentioned kind of music in keynotes. Walk us through what exactly that is, because it's a unique thing to do.
Yeah, there was a moment, and it was in Argentina. I'd just come out of doing some filming in Colombia, and I was a week into being in Buenos Aires in Argentina. I was writing some music there, and I remember laying just on the bed in the apartment, and this question of, if I died today, what's the one thing I've regretted not doing? Just popped up. I'm like, oh, that's a killer question, because for me, it was because I continue to ask myself that question over and over again, and I ask every client that as well. For me, immediately, it was having a grand piano on stage while delivering a talk. And for me, it was I had wanted and had this dream and this vision of somehow blending education and the entertainment component together in a way that made an impact. I knew that I didn't want to, through this gig that I did, it was like a 4-hour gig, maybe 15 years ago or something like that, 10, 15 years ago. And just, I remember at the end of that gig, it's maybe 1:00 in the morning and everyone's had a great time, me included. And just realizing that people aren't going to come up afterwards and say, hey man, I heard those lyrics in that second verse, and then that just changed my life. I'm going to go home and write in my gratitude journal. And, that's just not the place for it. And so I knew what it wasn't. I just didn't know what it was back then. But I knew what it wasn't going to be. And so that's where the seeking comes in, the curiosity about, okay, what else could it be? And then in 2017, when this came up, I had been booked for a talk with a grand piano back in Australia a few years earlier, and then it got cancelled about, I think it was a day or 2 or 3 days before the actual event. And I was devastated, man. It's like this dream that I had for years, and I just got there, and then bam, nope, not yet. And so I went away from it for a few years. And then I thought, you know what? When that came to me in 2017 of that answer, so dude, you really want to make this happen? Go and make it happen. And so reached out to the network that I had individually, booked in whoever would talk with me, and happened to talk with someone who had an event coming up where I was able to speak in front of 700 people.
That's amazing.
Open up one of the events, close down the other event, and beautiful grand piano on stage, the footage that I'd captured from Colombia. And so it depends on now, coming out to where it is now, it really depends on what event it is, what the outcome is that they're aiming to achieve from the event, what the theme is of that event, what else they have planned out, and then how can I insert myself there to help solve the challenges that they're aiming to solve. And so it's really not about me. It's about, okay, I have these skill sets from a speaking, coaching, and music standpoint. How can we best use them? And so we'll brainstorm usually, and sometimes there'll be private coaching for a select number of the audience members before or after the event. There's one that I've got coming up where we're doing an evening event for everybody. And then the following morning, there's just the 25 high achievers there. And we'll do a smaller, intimate breakfast where we're looking to have the piano in the middle of the room, and then people set up around the piano, like this more intimate kind of gathering. There's been philanthropic initiatives. There was one I did a little while ago where we went out to a local school. The kids made musical instruments out of recycled materials. Then they painted themselves and painted us and painted each other. And then we blasted one of my songs through the speaker, and they danced around, and we filmed that and turned that into an unofficial music video. And it was, everybody that was involved there, one, the school kids, two, was the people that were attending the event. And so they got to experience, it was a multi-day event. They got to experience that type of experience as well. And so, yeah, it depends on what the event is and how I can best help.
Sure.
But usually there's going to be a keynote involved. And then if we have a philanthropic arm to it or a coaching element to it as well, then that makes it nice and interesting.
That's very cool. But we're kind of at the end of the show. So how about we close with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself and your keynotes, and any other links you want to mention?
Sure. Yeah. CameronAtlas.com is the easiest way to find me. And at Cameron Atlas is the social handle on most of the popular ones. So yeah, look forward to connecting, guys.
Perfect, Cameron. Well, again, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I'll look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day, man.
Always a pleasure, Kevin. Take care.
Thank you. Okay, bye.